Okay.
Okay. Good morning. Hi, this is Steve Sabadeski, publisher of BuyUBuzz.com, and today we have Trey Ourso. It's Ourso, am I correct?
Ourso, that's right. That's
Ourso,
close.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you were head of, or executive director of GumboPac. Is that the right title, or?
Correct. I basically was, I guess you could say, the director. I created GumboPac back in April of this year as an anti-Vitter super PAC for the governor's race. And so
Sure.
I was the creator, director, and primary consultant on it.
Good. Okay. Thank you. And your firm that you do in the real world is Ourso Baychok. Is
That's
that correct?
correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. I work with a guy named Michael Baychok, and we do political campaigns throughout the country.
Oh, okay. Terrific. Why don't you, if you don't mind, give us a little background about what Ourso Baychok does?
Okay, we're a Democratic political consulting firm. We primarily do direct mail and general consulting, strategic consulting, messaging, targeting, and we work for campaigns throughout the country, from United States Senate and governor all the way down to just about anything you can imagine. We've done a lot of work in the last 10 or 12 years with legislative caucuses throughout the country, in Maine and Kansas and Missouri and North Carolina and many states like that. And of course, we're based here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and so we have a pretty good book of business in Louisiana that we've kept over the years.
Sure, absolutely. So the land of politics, Louisiana.
Right.
Really. So tell us about GumboPac. People have no idea what GumboPac was until the I guess maybe spring of 2015. So why don't you give us the beginnings of it?
Yeah. Well, obviously, when the year started, David Vitter looked pretty inevitable that he was going to become governor. There are lots of folks who were upset about that, were concerned about it, and were trying to figure out exactly what to do. And so we formed GumboPac, which is a super PAC whose primary purpose was to do whatever we could to make sure that Vitter would not be elected governor. So that was really the basis of it. The first, when we launched the PAC back in April, we launched a website and our Facebook social media applications, and we launched with about a 2.5-minute video that was designed and created somewhat in the nature of like a movie trailer, hoping that people would want more. And so we launched that and targeted that video through some digital targeting throughout the state. Then, of course, down in New Orleans, we put that billboard up, the ABB, Anybody But Vitter billboard, that was up for most of the summer, and that kind of created a little buzz, like, what are these people up to? And then primarily, the summer was pretty much a slow grind. We were trying to raise money, we were trying to raise awareness, we were trying to work with the earned media to in some way recreate or resurrect, I should say, the Vitters prostitution scandal, and just try and chip away at this aura of inevitability that he had, that everybody just thought he would be elected governor. So that's basically what we were doing.
I mean, certainly, I for one, and I think just about anybody involved in this industry and following politics in Louisiana, thought that David Vitter was inevitable winner, that he would be the next governor. Why don't you take us through in terms of what type of advantage he had going into the year 2015?
Well, we've always marveled at David Vitter. He's been a remarkable politician throughout his career. I would say that he had more to do with the Republican takeover of Louisiana than perhaps any other public official. Through over the years, his committee for a Republican majority, he helped swing both the state House and the state Senate to the Republicans. He helped get people elected to Congress. And he was really the primary architect behind the defeat of Barry Landry with Congressman Bill Cassidy in 2014. And he had really set it up. Basically, there was really one final thing to happen for a complete conquest, I could say, of Louisiana by the Republicans, and that was to get himself elected governor. And as we entered 2015, coming off of the Senate race in 2014, it really looked like everything was set up exactly the way he wanted it and needed it to be. His poll numbers were very good. We all assumed that between his campaign and his super PAC, the Fund for Louisiana's Future, they were going to have more money than really all the other candidates combined. The field against him didn't seem to be shaping up really strong. I mean, at the time, the conventional wisdom, so to speak, was that Governor-elect now, Jon Bel Edwards, probably would not be able to mount that big of a campaign. Nothing against him personally, but he came from Meet Louisiana. He was a member of the state house. He didn't have very high name recognition. He had not raised a ton of money. But more importantly, just the historical voting trends and voting patterns of Louisiana over the last 10 and 20 years made it seem really highly unlikely that a relatively unknown state representative from Meet Louisiana was going to knock off David Vitter for governor. And so everything really was stacked in Vitter's favor. As long as both Darden and Angel were running from the right or as Republicans, those two guys really throughout the entire election sucked the oxygen out of each other. Neither of them was ever really able to move a bunch. There might have been room on the other side of Vitter for one of them, but there was not room on the other side of Vitter with both of them in the race. And mathematically, it almost made it impossible for those guys to get past Vitter into the runoff. And as you know, throughout all of 2015, David Vitter wanted Jon Bel Edwards in the runoff, and Jon Bel Edwards desperately wanted David Vitter in the runoff. And they both got exactly what they wanted. It just wasn't quite the outcome that most people would have predicted even 4 or 5 months ago.
So how did you get involved with Super PAC, GumboPac?
Yeah, last year in 2014, Michael and I did a lot of work for the Senate Majority PAC, Harry Reid's PAC, and we worked in U.S. Senate races throughout the country in 2014. And we've worked with these national super PACs quite a bit over the years. I still do some lobbying for the trial bar here in Louisiana and have a relationship with them. And back in February, Vitter gave a speech to the Louisiana Oil and Gas Association over in Lake Charles, where he basically said, my number one priority when I'm elected governor is to institute Texas and Oklahoma style tort reform in the state of Louisiana. And so there are a lot of folks on our side of the equation that were pretty worried about that, just for the rights of average citizens and access to the civil justice system. And so they were looking for something to do. Most all of the guys from that group were supporting Jon Bel Edwards. None of them were supporting David Vitter, obviously, just because he had a long track record of being anti-consumer and against the plaintiff's bar. And so I, in meetings with him, suggested, hey, why don't you let me put this PAC together? And really, we didn't know what we were, you never really know how these things are going to end when you set them up. And so I had 3 goals. One was to create a structure, legally, campaign finance, build a team of consultants, to build a structure so that if at some point the race shifted so that we were going to be funded, we would be ready to go, because it just takes a while to get these things. You just don't say, oh, I'm going to have a super PAC tomorrow, and all of a sudden you're on TV. So that takes a while. And the second thing, as I mentioned, was just to try and chip away at this aura of inevitability that Vitter had. And the third was to resurrect the prostitution scandal. I would like to say that I was had the foresight back in March and April to say, oh, well, in October, the Democratic Governors Association is going to get involved in the race. And not only are they going to buy into the race here in Louisiana, but they're going to basically buy in through GumboPac to the tune of $2.25 million. I wish I could say I was smart enough back then to plan for that, but I really wasn't. But it worked out that way.
Right. That was really very surprising. Obviously, the polls indicated at that time, excuse me, um, in the spring, Jon Bel didn't, I don't think he even really registered at all. Not until maybe June, July. And certainly October, then it looked like he could possibly take it all. In terms of creating the super PAC, you mentioned about the legal structure, and how long did that take? Because obviously a lot of people, including myself, are pretty ignorant as it relates to super PACs and what's involved.
The first thing I did was I hired a law firm out of Washington, D.C., Sandler, Reef, Lamb, and something else. Some guys that I'd known. I served as director of the state Democratic Party from 1997 to 2001, and Neil Reef was an attorney at the DNC back when I was direct. So I knew these guys for a long time, and they specialize in election law. So I hired them to basically make sure that we complied with all the legalities of the PAC, but also to handle all the campaign finance reporting and that kind of stuff. And it took, it took a few weeks to kind of to get going and get the paperwork. But really, we had to decide. There's a super PAC, which I started. GumboPac is a super PAC. That means that I can accept and expend unlimited amounts of money from any source, but I just have to report every dollar in and every dollar out. So my campaign finance reports are filed on the same schedule as the gubernatorial candidate. So everybody, when we file this next report in a week or two, they'll be able to see all the money, where it came from, and they'll be able to see exactly how we spent it. It's all very transparent. There's two other types of super PACs, if you will. There's a C4, and then there's a 527. Both of those are federal designations. Those also can accept unlimited sources of money, but they have more restrictions on exactly how they can spend it, on what purposes they can spend it, but they don't have to report their source of their contributions. So a 527, for instance, if you remember when John Kerry was running for president, the Swift boat ads, those were done by 527 against John Kerry. We did have a 527, but we really didn't use it. I chose not to do the C4 or the 527 because of the restrictions on the way they allowed you to use your money. And so it was a bit of a risk, because at first, for a while, it was really hard for us to raise money because people were worried about David Vitter taking political retribution against him, because even in the off chance that we would have been successful and David Vitter was not elected governor, everybody's saying, well, shucks, he's still going to be a United States senator. And I don't want my name to show up on these campaign finance reports because Vitter's going to have it in for me forever. But as it turned out, it worked. It worked.
Yeah, it sure did.
Yeah.
So one of the things I think people don't understand is the relationship of the super PAC that you just described, that and the campaign. As I understand it, you just cannot. There's no coordination of the way that you spend the money. Is that correct?
That's true. You can communicate, but you cannot coordinate. And so everybody knows that David Vitter raised a ton of money for his PAC. He even contributed $1 million or $2 million, whatever it was, out of a Senate campaign into his PAC. For me, it was pretty easy, because obviously the goal when we started GumboPac, it was an anti-David Vitter PAC. So I certainly wouldn't coordinate with David Vitter. And I really tried to go above and beyond the standards as far as coordination and communication. I really just kind of walled myself off. I mean, all the people in the Jon Bel Edwards campaign, lots of folks working for his campaign are longtime friends of mine, but I really just did not communicate with them. I did not communicate with the state party. And in the primary, it really wasn't that big of a deal, because we were obviously so focused on beating down Vitter. Now, when the runoff came up and it was just Governor-elect Edwards and Vitter at that point, well, obviously, we were still anti-Vitter, and we were going to carry the anti-Vitter messaging, but it was very clear who we wanted to win the race at that point, right? And so we still we still just didn't communicate with him at all. We cut off communicate. In fact, I saw Governor-elect Edwards about a week or week and a half ago, and it was maybe 2 to 2.5 weeks after the election, and I was at an event that he was at, and that was the first time we had spoken since the election. So we really played it straight.
Sure. The difference between communication and coordination. Obviously, communication meaning email, telephone, etc. So that's something that you can do, but you can't coordinate. So in terms of the way that you spend money, or what about the money that you receive? Can you coordinate that?
The lawyers would prefer you just not to communicate because it makes it a lot easier and safer. I could talk to somebody in this campaign about LSU football or about the upcoming hunting season or something. We just did not want to talk politics at all. And so it was possible and allowable for candidates to raise money in the PACs, but you cannot discuss the method of how you're going to spend it, when you're going to spend it, what you're going to say or do, who you're going to say it to. You can't coordinate any means of expenditures of the money. And so, in other words, it would have been permissible for Jon Bel Edwards to say, hey, go give GumboPac X amount of dollars, whatever they want it to be. But it would not have been permissible for him to say, hey, Trey, this is Jon Bel or somebody from the campaign. Sure wish y'all would do an ad about whatever subject on Vitter. We couldn't have any kind of communication.
Sure. Okay, and one of the reasons why I asked that is because, as you remember, the day before the general election, David Vitter was in a car accident, and the lady who was driving was involved with both the super PAC and also the campaign. And in terms of raising money, am I correct? And a lot of people, including myself, didn't fully understand what the distinction was. Other than maybe to the difference being how you spend the money from a pure legal, literal perspective.
A lot of insiders were worked up about that when they had that car wreck. Mm-hmm. I didn't dwell on it a whole lot, because I think she may have been a fundraiser for the PAC, so it really would have been permissible for them to talk about fundraising or to have even been at a fundraiser together. But the truth of the matter is, that was a really bad day for David Vitter. That was the day before the primary, and the car wreck was the least of it. I was so focused on the whole Spygate thing that had occurred earlier that morning at the coffee shop in Jefferson Parish with Sheriff Norman and Senator Martini and that group that we knew immediately that was going to be a much bigger story and have a greater impact on the election than the car accident. Sometimes it's processy, and voters just don't necessarily buy into the whole process. So he was in a car with a woman who may or may not have been on the staff of a super PAC that he may or may not have been supposed to talk. It's just so hard to, and in voters' mind, they just expect politicians to raise money for campaigns and PACs. But they don't expect a U.S. senator to hire a private investigator to try and secretly record a sheriff's phone conversation. That we knew was going to be a big story.
Yeah, and I think 2 days before, the Gambit newspaper had broken a story about a barber who had knowledge about David Vitter, or at least he says he had knowledge about David Vitter. The barber shop was right across the street from Wendy Cortez. Wendy Cortez was allegedly the prostitute that David Vitter was courting, and so with the combination of that situation, the barber story, the Spygate, and then the accident. That night, I remember writing a column calling David Vitter had a bad hair day because the combination of so many things going wrong for him on the day before the election, and plus he left the accident scene.
Yeah, that was strange. Yeah,
which was very strange. Now, he said that he had gotten permission. I remember watching the interview or the press conference with the sheriff, who said who indicated, I think he indicated something contrary to that. But anyway, I mean, it was just a bad day. So the super PAC, you really didn't have any coordination. So therefore, or in your case, communication. So therefore, you could have put something up that the campaign just didn't want to have up there, and vice versa.
That is true. You know, it's hard. We were trying to appeal to a certain group of voters, particularly in the runoff. We spent just under $3 million on television in the runoff alone. I would say that 95% of our focus and our target would have been the people who voted for Scott Angel and Jay Darden in the primary. We knew that these were people who were Republican-leaning voters, but for whatever reason had chosen not to vote for David Vitter. Our polling showed that we could get a little over half of the Jay Darden supporters and a little under half of the Scott Angel supporters. And so we really wanted to try and freeze those people in a posture that they could, again, not vote for David Vitter. And so you had the Spygate thing that happened the day before the primary. Of course, Jon Bel came in at 40%. Vitter came in at only 23%. The next 2 or 3 days, 4 days was dominated by news about, wow, you know, what just happened, and the whole Spygate thing. So it threw Vitter off his game. And then we launched that first ad. The campaign launched an ad where Jon Bel was speaking in the camera saying, over the next few weeks, David Vitters is going to tell a bunch of lies about me. Okay, he was trying to lay that. And we put up the ad where we took the clips of Scott Angel and Jay Darden from the televised debates where they called him all kinds of awful stuff. And the whole goal of that ad was just to take those Darden and Angel voters and just hold on to them and freeze and try and hold as many. But you're absolutely correct to say that. I guess, you know, it's like when you're looking for smoke signals when they're going to pick a new pope. You know, you got white smoke and black smoke. You try
right.
On this super PAC thing. It's really the same thing. I mean, you're kind of looking for the signals and what lane. And we always knew that our lane was going to be an anti-Vitter lane. When the Jon Bel Edwards campaign came up with the ad, "Patriots over prostitutes," or vice versa, however they named the ad. Obviously, that was a very powerful television commercial, and we took that as a signal that, hey, they want somebody filling a lane on the prostitute thing. And then we came right after that and put up the ad with the old news clip of Greg Merriweather at that televised debate back in 2010, where he kept saying, "Senator, did you break the law? Did you break the law? Yes or no?" And Vitter kept saying, "I'm not answering the question." So we followed their ad with the prostitute thing, and then, crazy enough, as you know, after the Paris attacks about a week before the runoff election, Vitter, of course, tried to nationalize the election and jumped on the Syrian refugee thing that was going around the country. And through the research that we had on Vitter, we knew right away that he had missed a couple of committee hearings on Syria, and he had issued a press release once saying that he didn't think that the conditions in Syria posed a threat to the United States or our allies. And so we produced an ad in the final week of the campaign that we spent the last 3 days on TV, basically attacking David Vitter on Syria, of all things.
Sure.
So that's how these campaigns, because they were killing Jon Bel with ads about Syria, saying he and Obama were going to let all these folks in the country, in the state. And never in my wildest dreams back in April would I have thought that the last few days of the campaign we're going to be running ads talking about Syria.
Syria, yeah. Well, it was so apparent that Vitter, ever since 2010, or actually before then, but certainly in 2010, when he ran against Charlie Melancon, that he wanted to use Obama. And I mean, obviously, in orchestrating the Cassidy election, win over Mary Landrieu, you know, it was always 97% connection to Obama. And so he was really grabbing at just about anything he could. And I think a lot of people, including myself, thought, hey, maybe he can get some mileage out of it.
Yeah.
But it looked like he didn't. There was one day on Wednesday before the election where he began to spike. But then after that, at least according to the pollsters, he really didn't gain from that. Were you surprised?
A little bit, but the voters took it out on Democrats and Obama in 2010. They did the same thing in 2014. They recognize that he's on the way out. I think voters also recognize that this was a state election for governor and not a federal election for United States Senate. A lot of differences here. But I will say that if you recall, the primary was October 24th. 2 weeks before the primary, on October 10th, the Republican Governors Association came in and put down $1 million buy attacking Jon Bel Edwards' alleged links to Barack Obama, President Obama. And they ran those ads all the way through the end of the runoff. So they really had a 6-week constant barrage, millions of dollars of Edwards, Obama, Edwards, Obama. At the end of the election, you could start to see, at least in our internal polling, Edwards' unfavorables coming up a little bit. The questions that we asked about associations with President Obama were starting to stick. And really, Vitters' favorable numbers actually got a little bit better in the last week of the election. Maybe it was over the Syrian or the Paris attack. I'm really not sure why. But we did see it start to take hold a little bit at the end. But even after 6 weeks and millions of dollars, it never did. It never did the damage that they obviously hoped. And really, what happened? We started seeing David Vitters' numbers moving back in August and early September. His favorabilities, trustworthiness, honesty, tell the truth. Part of the problem in Washington, we were testing all these measures throughout the year, and we started just to see it erode back in August and early September. Then a few weeks before the primary, you had the other PAC that came in, that water PAC, and ran some ads against Vitter. That the timing on those was really good. And really what happened, I think, once his trustworthiness, honesty marks went upside down, went underwater, he was no longer a viable messenger for the Obama message or anything else. Voters really just were not buying what he was selling. And I can say that because I've been on the other side of that thing, in 2010 with the Mélenchon campaign, which we were involved in. Voters in 2010 were not buying anything that a Democrat was selling anywhere in the country. They were taking it out on the president. They're taking it on this. And that's really, I think, what happened to Vitter. He lost his credibility as a messenger.
Yeah, from what I could see, he was being projected, or he projected himself as really an angry, vindictive person, and a lot of people picked up on that. And like you said earlier, people didn't want to go public because they were fearful of what might happen on the downside should he lose the election, but remain as a U.S. senator. Going back, if I might, in terms of the spring, the article that you wrote that appeared in Campaign and Election magazine,
Yes.
okay, which I think definitely would recommend, and we will link to it for sure. You had said about that you put a pin over the state capitol, and so therefore the legislators would see the commercial and be reminded by the commercial. I gotta tell you, I thought I knew everything about technology, but when I read that, I'm going, okay, well, what is a pin? So I have a couple questions about the technical aspects of the campaign. I think are just fascinating.
Okay, when we launched the first video back in April, the legislature was in session, and we were trying to get the political insiders talking about GumboPac and to create a anti-Vitter conversation. And I've actually learned a lot in the last year or two about this myself, but there's functions, digital advertising, and all sorts. I mean, obviously through GumboPac throughout the summer, we did most of our advertising through Facebook, and we were trying to build an online community. But you also have digital advertising, just like every time you get on a website and an ad pops up, as you know, you create cookies where you've been on the web and they follow you around. Well, they also have a function, I think it's what they would call geo-targeting,
Sure.
Geographical targeting. And when I say drop a pin, I mean, that's kind of a figure of speech, but if you had a map and you put a pin on it. And so when we launched that video, we basically dropped a digital pin on the state capitol and put like a half a mile circle around it. So we were streaming there. Yeah.
Gotcha. So it would be by IP address, or it would just be by area code, or, I mean,
as people were opening their computers and turning on inside that geographic area, we were beaming our ads into that area. You can do the same thing. You can do the same thing in a parish or in a zip code. I mean, you can drop a pin and as big around as you want geographically to target. We also did one, I think in the summer, I didn't write it in the column, but the Louisiana Bar Association was having their annual conference in Destin.
Right.
And we knew there was going to be a lot of lawyers, politicians, judges, donors, all those types of people were at Destin. So during the week of that conference, we dropped a pin on Sandestin Resort, where they always have the thing, and beamed the GumboPac ads to Destin, Florida, just because we knew there were going to be a lot of Louisiana people there.
Gotcha. I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. Being involved with the digital side of everything, you know, over the last 24 years. Yeah, that really is. I was not aware. I mean, certainly I've seen the Facebook ads and I've seen some of the other, but you know, I didn't know that the other part of the world. I knew the Facebook, you know, you could geo target like that, but I didn't realize that you could do that with all the other ads. But you're saying that you can.
Yeah,
so
and the other cool thing is, I mentioned earlier, we're a direct mail firm. So,
right.
For instance, if I was doing a mailer to a universe of say 20,000 households, I could take that list off the voter file, give that list to my digital folks, and they can match that list to IP addresses at about a 70, depending on the list, 70 to 80% match. So I can send you mail. I can also take content and drive it to your desktop or laptop to the same list. So we can now layer the digital advertising in. You know, we always talked about TV, radio, mail, and knocking on doors and all this kind of stuff. Well, the digital is just another layer. We can actually target to a list of voters right in on their computer. It's pretty cool.
That's really powerful. I mean, and then the door-to-door capturing the information. You know, some of the technology that I've seen, the door-to-door campaigns, matching that up with what you're describing. I mean, you know, I can imagine if a candidate is going to a particular parish or county, let's say, and so you can drop a pin and you can you know, send out the mailing and then coordinate that with the door-to-door actual communications as you gather information from the people on the other side of the door.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's absolutely amazing. Now, you also mentioned about a talking mailer.
Yes.
So what is that?
Okay, in the 2012 United States Senate race in Missouri, we were working up there for a super PAC on behalf of Claire McCaskill, the United States Senator from Missouri. She had a gentleman named Todd Aiken who was running against her, and he's the guy who said if it's a legitimate rape, a woman's body has a way of shutting that kind of thing down. We took that clip from Todd Aiken along with several other audio clips and produced a talking mailer that we mailed in the Senate race in Missouri in 2012. And it mails out, I don't know, I thought I might have one here on my desk. It mails out just like a regular mailer. When you open it up, it begins talking to you, and it has a little, like a Hallmark or a Christmas greeting card type situation.
Gotcha. Okay.
That got a lot of acclaim in the race in Missouri. It won a lot of awards, got a lot of earned media. Well, in the runoff for the governor's race this year, the ad I spoke about it earlier, where we took the audio clips of Vitter, of Darden and Angel from the televised debates. When we produced that television ad, it just sounded to us like it set up exactly right for a talking mailer. And so we contacted the company where we buy the shells from, and they really only had a few thousand of them. Well, obviously you can't do a whole lot in a statewide election with a few thousand mailers, but we went ahead and took all that they had, and we basically designed the mailer graphically, and then we inserted the audio clips of that television ad. And since we only had a few thousand of them, we figured we had to think carefully about who we would send it to. So we basically took a list of all legislators, Republican officials, Republican Central Committee folks, parish officials, sheriffs, and we targeted that talking mailer of Jay Darden and Scott Angel beating up on David Vitter. We targeted that to Republican officials, to the news media to a certain extent, and then we had a few of them left over that we cut a little slice of the voter file from Lafayette and East Baton Rouge parishes and mailed some out. So there are actual real voters who got these things, not many of them. And so again, it was the GumboPac thing for a long time. It was kind of like guerrilla warfare. I mean, we were underfunded and people thought we were nuts when we got started, and we were going up against David Vitter, who everybody assumed was going to win. So we knew that we had to think creatively, do things a little differently, take a few chances. And so on the talking mailer, it got them talking. I mean, every Republican official in the state just about got one of these things, and that was on purpose.
That's absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it really is. Can I ask if there was I've used Nation Builder as a web format. Mm-hmm. Was there a format that you used that included all the totality of being able to contact with people?
No. We mostly use the voter file, the voter file for our contact sources, poll lists and everything. And then, of course, digitally, I'll tell you what we did do, though. In the runoff, most of our digital money that we spent throughout the year, as I mentioned earlier, was on Facebook. We were trying to build this community, so to speak, of anti-Vitter people. In the runoff, when we were better funded, we did have the budget finally to do some digital advertising. And so, our digital team, we targeted those ads at parishes where Jay Darden and Scott Angel performed best, because again, we were trying to reach those people the most. So we did quite a bit of, I think we spent $75,000 in the last week of the election alone, just on digital ads. But those were specifically targeted at parishes in which Jay Darden and Scott Angel did particularly well.
Right. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people outside the state, outside of the Vitter Edwards election focus, who are going to be watching this, and so I'm trying to get an idea as to what they can learn from this experience. I mean, obviously, we're a year ahead of them. Their election season, big election season, as well as ours, is coming up in next October, November.
Right.
And what lessons do you think that they can learn from this election here?
Well, there has been a lot of interest around the country in the election because it was just such the final result was such an upset of what everybody thought was going to happen. Look, I'm proud of the work that we did with GumboPac, and I don't think anybody can deny that we had a impact on the outcome of the election. But at the end of the day, everything worked out the way we needed it to work out. David Vitter is a flawed candidate. Okay. I really don't know that he thought the race was going to turn into what it did. In 2010, it never really got where we got it this time. Okay.
Right.
And so I think that he thought he could get through this race without having to relive all of his past scandals. That was one. Jon Bel Edwards turned out to be a great candidate. He turned out to have the perfect profile. pro-life, pro-gun, West Point, Army Ranger. He stood up to David Vitter at those debates and didn't take anything off of him and gave him the business. And his team, Jared Arsamont, who created his ads, I think did a fantastic job on his commercials. And so they ran a disciplined campaign with a candidate who turned out to be just right. And David Vitter, I think, showed us that he's always been such an effective politician, but it seems like he works a little bit better from the lead or from a position of power. He really, I don't think, ran a very good race when he was under a withering attack, prolonged. I just think at the end of the day, he didn't run very good under those circumstances. Everything just worked out. You know, there were little pieces here and there. You had the Spygate scandal that I think really had an impact. I think people from outside the state didn't realize how much play that was getting here. It was on the news. And so, you know, you had a combination of a great candidate on the Democratic side, a flawed candidate on the Republican side. You had a group like us who was able to come in and provide some air cover, so to speak, and just a constant pounding on Vitter. I don't really know how to say what they learned from that, except for that if you got to be disciplined, you got to spend money correctly, you got to stay on message. You recall this, think back to the election, the governor's race in 2015, how many debates did we have about Medicare expansion, about coastal funding, about education policy, about really not even that much about the budget, and you and I both know the serious budget problems that we have in Louisiana. This race, we were determined through GumboPac, and obviously the Jon Bel Edwards campaign was on the same page to make this race about David Vitter. It was a referendum on David Vitter, and try as he might, we never allowed the dialogue to change. And I think that was the biggest lesson to be learned. We stayed disciplined to our messaging.
From I guess a campaign perspective, other than the big picture that you're talking about, focusing on David Vitter, making him the issue of the campaign, what seemed to work the best? Is there something that you can say, hey, nation, this thing, what we did here really worked? Was it the pinning? Was it the talking mailer? Was it the TV advertising? Did you find that internet worked better than? I'm just trying to get an idea as to in this new day and age of technology and media, what seems to work the best, at least in terms of what worked in October, November 2015 in that particular race?
I do think that our television ads were spot on. I think they helped a lot. That the ad that we ran with Darnagel.
Yeah, that was very powerful.
Ad in the New Orleans market with Dual Norman, I think, was an effective ad for that particular market. But I really believe the work that we did throughout the summer and building this conversation, so to speak. I'm telling you, you meet people all the time. Well, I'm not for Vitter, I can't be for Vitter, but nobody would ever say anything. I really think that the online community that we built and nurtured day in and day out, week after week and month after month, laid a foundation that got people talking and got people thinking, maybe we can do better, or maybe this guy can be beat. And I think really, and it's hard to quantify, but I think that had a lasting impact and laid the foundation for what happened in November.
Okay, the last series of questions I have, and I really thank you for taking your time day after Christmas. As you know, I guess I own, manage, etc., not just my website, BayouBuzz.com, but a Facebook group called Louisiana Politics. And obviously we were, it was an explosive community. Right. Very, very powerful, meaningful discussion going on about the election on all sides of the issue. Right. I thought maybe somebody was going to throw a hand grenade in there. That's how explosive it.
You've been walking around with me.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So you mentioned about building the online community. So why don't you maybe take us through that?
Okay. What we were trying to do was we focused almost all of our money throughout the year on Facebook because I thought it was the best platform to let people talk, communicate, share. And so as most people know, when you have a Facebook page like that, you acquire likes, people like your Facebook page. So every day from the day we started GumboPac back in April until November 23rd or whatever day it was, we were spending money acquiring new likes, more people. And as you know, it's a cumulative effect. So the more people that like you, your page, every time you post something, the more people it shows up on their computer. When they like it and share it, it just spreads out. And so by the end of the campaign, we had, I don't know, maybe 10,500 likes on the GumboPac Facebook page. But on top of doing like acquisitions, we were also boosting all of our posts. So if there was a story, for instance, back in September, Tyler Bridges wrote a story in Advocate. It was a very long story that basically summarized the whole prostitution scandal that Vitter had endured. We took that and we posted it on the GumboPac's Facebook page, and then we spent money to boost that post, okay? And so, as you know, you can look on your Facebook page and all of your data and see. So throughout the summer, early summer, we might have been reaching 20, 25,000 people a day on Facebook. By midsummer, we were reaching 40,000 people a day, every day, just on our Facebook page. As we got into October, we were spending a little bit more money. We might have been reaching 60 to 70,000 people every day, 7 days a week, just on our Facebook page. And then of course in November, when we had even more money, we were boosting our page and our post even more. And that was added to the organic likes and shares of your followers and people sending the stuff out. So in the last week of the election in November, we were reaching well over 100,000 people a day just on our Facebook page alone. So that's what I say, the cumulative effect from April to late November of just reaching thousands and tens of thousands of people a day on this Facebook, social media, online community, I think had an impact that most people, because you don't really see it, you drive around town, you're not aware of it, but I'm watching it every day as I'm managing these pages, and I think it had an impact. It really did.
Well, it definitely did. I mean, just looking at the Louisiana Politics group and, seeing something from GumboPac or seeing something from David Vitter's campaign, it obviously it's right there in front of you. And certainly, I mean, and so therefore you're going to share it or not share it, but you're going to communicate about it. And certainly in terms of what we did by Buzz is that, we would take our content and we would post it on social media. And did you use Twitter at all? Or
I did.
Yeah.
We did use Twitter some, and we didn't really put as much money into it. I could check and see how many followers or however that kind of stuff. I tweeted the debates a lot and had a lot of fun doing that. As stories came out, tweet them, and we're still keeping the platforms active to a certain degree. But yeah, we did have a Twitter account, or however you can tell I'm not as big on the tweeting.
Twitter, yeah. Well, look, I understand. That is where I believe it, quite frankly, where where I'm finding at least the media people are, a lot of the political people are, and so I think that's really going to develop to be now that advertising and some of the other tools really going to become a really powerful platform along with Facebook and other social media. Listen, thank you so much.
Sure.
I really appreciate, and we'll definitely chat again, check back with you, and I really appreciate your taking your time with us. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. You have a happy New Year and enjoy the holidays.
Thank you so much.